Welcome back to the Magical Learning Podcast. In today's episode, Danette has a real treat for you. It's how to improve your thoughts. This particular podcast covers a lot of different ways to improve your thinking, not only from like a business sense, but from a professional and internal sense as well.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Magical Learning's podcast. My name is Danette Fenton-Menzies, and I'm the Director of Learning here at Magical Learning. Today I wanted to talk about your thoughts. This is a topic that for many years has fascinated me, particularly as an executive coach, just listening to people's thoughts as they share them with me. And I'd like to start this podcast with a beautiful quote from Buddha. Nothing can harm you as much as your own thoughts. And this is one of the things that I want us to become more aware of, is that if we're not aware of our thoughts, in many instances they can certainly lead to a life that isn't as happy as it possibly could be. For example, what we know is that our thoughts lead to our emotions. So what we think creates emotions. The moment an emotion is created in our body releases chemicals that have an impact on us. Those chemical reactions in us often lead to particular behaviours in us, and over time it becomes who we are and the experiences we have in our lives. So for example, what we know about the brain, at least 64% of our thoughts are negative, and this is hardwired into our brain back from cave people days when we would be scanning the horizon more for threats than for things that would make us happy. So our thoughts will naturally tend towards the negative. Therefore, it is really important to become aware of those thoughts, because what happens is our thoughts are quite fleeting. We have up to about 60,000 thoughts a day. It's the thoughts we give our attention to that really create the impact in our life. So what happens is often those thoughts we then externalize and think, well, if I change something outside of me, the world will be fine. The thing is, what we need to do is work on the internal stuff, not the external stuff. So if we want something that is going to be lasting in terms of change, then we need to persist at working on the thoughts that serve us and getting rid of the thoughts that no longer serve us. And I really love this quote by Eckhart Tolle, which is, if you get the inside right, the outside will fall into place. Now, of course, when we repeat thoughts, if we keep repeating them over and over and over, we end up with beliefs. Now, one of the things I've noticed with many people that I coach is that we all have beliefs that no longer serve us. Now, those beliefs may have come from our childhood, and while they may have been useful in our childhood, they are no longer useful now. They could just come from repeated thinking. For example, some people, when they make a mistake, because they have some perfectionist tendencies, and they'll even label themselves, I am a perfectionist. So their thoughts are around, if I fail, then that is bad, rather than, if I fail, I've just learned something new. So even the labels we give ourselves, which come from our thoughts, can either serve us or can make our life not as great as it could be. Another thing our brain does with our thoughts is once we have a thought, particularly if it's quite a strongly held belief, then what our brain will do is apply confirmation bias. This is basically where our brain looks for evidence to confirm our thoughts and our beliefs, and it will actually discount any evidence that shows things to the contrary. And so it can be quite persuasive because our brain is focusing on what it wants to focus on, and then it's confirming what we already believe to be true by deleting information that is contrary to our beliefs. Now, the lovely thing is that our brain can actually change, and this is a concept called neuroplasticity. So some of the things that we can do to help our brain change, particularly if we know that some of our thoughts aren't necessarily helpful. Well, the first thing we need to do is become aware of those thoughts. Some of the ways we can become aware of those thoughts is to meditate, because when you meditate, you'll notice your thoughts flitting through your mind. Just even slowing down can help us. When we slow down again, those thoughts become a bit more conspicuous. Another thing I love to do is journal. That really does help me take the thoughts out of my mind and put them down on paper so I can examine them. Another thing you can do is seek feedback from whether it's a trusted loved one, friend, even a coach or a mentor. Once you've actually identified these are some of the thoughts that perhaps are no longer serving me, start small in terms of your change. So don't bring on, I'm going to change all of my thoughts. Pick one to start with. When you work out a better thought for yourself, then as you start to implement it, make sure that you do a celebration dance. When we do that, it puts the beautiful feel-good chemicals into our bloodstream, and we want to do it again. The other thing I think that helps is to share with someone, to celebrate with them about what you're doing. And again, some more strategies, but I'd love to share another quote. And this one's by Benjamin Disraeli. And he says, "Nurture your mind with great thoughts, for you will never go higher than you think." And I think that is actually really important for us to consider. If you're not where you want to be in your life, it's not about changing those external things so much as it's changing your thoughts to start with. Because Benjamin Disraeli is right. Our life will never go above our level of thinking about our life. Some things we can do to improve our level of thinking is read widely, watch documentaries about great thinkers, even listen to great audiobooks. Try new thoughts on. So as you're watching those great thinkers or reading about them, examine what their thoughts are, and then maybe try one or two of those thoughts on instead of your regular thoughts. Now remember, it will be uncomfortable when you do that first up. Over time, it will become your new normal, and you'll notice that things absolutely will change. I think something that is really important for us is to stay curious. Children have that childlike wonder, and I think as adults we get more serious and we forget that life really is just one big experiment that we should enjoy. So be curious about what's going on. Also, I think take that time to examine your thoughts, and I think that's where journaling can really help. Some other things we can do is to get really still. In that stillness, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether you just sit for a little while and notice what comes up in terms of what's in your mind. One of the ways I love to get still is to just simply get out in nature. We're very blessed here. We live on a farm. I can literally step outside my back door and I'm in nature. I would encourage all of you to get out in nature. Don't take your device with you. Instead, take a notebook. Then sit quietly with your eyes closed and just notice what bubbles up. And then jot them down in your notebook so that you can remember them later on, and spend some time examining whether they're serving and empowering you or whether they're actually dragging you down. I think some other things we can do is simply get outside our comfort zone. So try new things, try things that scare you. Notice your thoughts when you get scared, and then check in. Are they actually true? Ask yourself some questions. Are they true? How do I know that? What would empower me more? And insert someone that you admire who's a great thinker. Think of this. For example, what would Mother Teresa think of this? What would Nelson Mandela think of this? One of the things that I know is that when we take the time to ask ourselves questions and we sit in that quiet space, again, it allows us to become more aware of our thoughts and, again, to work out whether they are serving us. Now, Eckhart Tolle shares a beautiful quote, which I think is for me, one of the reasons why it is so important to examine our thoughts. All things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, and inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. Our thoughts determine whether we actually notice those things that truly matter. If our thoughts keep chattering away and they convince us that the world is not a great place, etc., we stop being present. We spend most of our time in our head, churning away, either thinking about the past or thinking about the future, and not actually being present and noticing those things that truly matter. Things such as Eckhart Tolle shared about beauty, love, creativity, joy, and inner peace. Some other things that can help you in terms of examining your thoughts is to examine your language. When you make a mistake, what words do you use to yourself? Do you say, "Oh, I'm a failure, I'm an idiot, I'm stupid"? Or do you go like Ben Zander, who has a wonderful TED talk, "How fascinating"? Or "Wow, look what I just learned"? Now, if you're like most people, it's not the last two, it's the first three. And the thing is, that doesn't encourage us to get curious and learn. To simply changing your language about when you fail, to remember that we all fail. It's part of the learning process. It's part of growing. So beating yourself up is not going to encourage you to want to do more of it. But if you use that childlike wonder of Ben Zander and saying, "How fascinating," or just, "Wow, look what I've learned," again, that's changing your thinking in a far more positive way. Another thing that I think really helps around your thinking is to find someone who also wants to go on that journey. Get an accountability buddy and share your thoughts with one another. One thing I do when I journal is I rate my day. And each week I also rate my week. And when I rate my week and I score my week from 1 to 10, 1 being not such a great week through to 10 being an amazing week, I also write down the positives of the week and the negatives of the week. And what I know is they are neither positive or negative. They actually are what they are. Noticing the negative, but to come to what was I thinking about that particular, whether it was an individual, an experience, a place that I was at, and examining whether those thoughts really are helpful. And generally, because they're negative, they're not. And so I think about, what can I replace those thoughts with? Some other really simple ways to change our thoughts. Affirmations are great. It's a great way of changing your thought. If you have one bad thought, have a good affirmation. Gratitude is another wonderful way of putting those beautiful feel-good chemicals into our brain and thinking about how good we actually have things. Our lives are pretty amazing for most of us. There's a lot of people across the world that would give their right and left arm to experience what we get to experience on a daily basis. I love the phrase, and this came from Tiny Habits, "Today is going to be a great day." So before we get out of bed, actually saying that to ourselves. What a beautiful thought to start the day with. And it actually, from a confirmation bias perspective, gets your brain to look at what could be great about today. So it starts to hone in on those things rather than imagine waking up going, "Oh, not another. Oh." Again, those thoughts not very helpful. Some other things to think about, just taking action. So not thinking about things, just taking the action. What do you know needs to happen next, and just doing it. Looking at different perspectives. So what would my mum think about this? What would my best friend think about this? What might, and again, insert the person you admire, think about this. One thing that I think all of us should really pay attention to, and this comes from our thoughts, is our excuses. So when we don't think we can do something, we come up with excuses. The problem with those excuses is they keep us from living that great life that we are all capable of living. So they are definitely worth examining and looking at what is the fear underneath those excuses. I think one of the things that really helps us with managing our thoughts is just learning to be present. When we're present, we are more in our body, we are less in the thinking part of our brain, and we just experience what is in front of us. There's less clutter in our brain when we are present. So they are some tips that I hope can help you think about your thinking. Think about the results you get from your thinking. So if you're enjoying your life, you're probably thinking some pretty good thoughts. If you're not necessarily enjoying your life at present, then your thoughts are absolutely worth examining. And I'm going to end with a lovely quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. And this, to me, is a beautiful quote, and I'll just talk about it straight after I read it out to you. With the new day comes new strength and new thoughts. We have the opportunity every day to examine and change our thoughts. If you are not getting the results that you want, if you are not feeling the way you would really like to feel, then it is absolutely worth spending some time investing in examining your thoughts and letting go of those that no longer serve you. I hope this podcast has been helpful, and until next time, stay magical.
Thank you for listening to the Magical Learning Podcast. This month we have some really awesome things that are free that you can just sign up for right now. First of all, on the 11th at 10:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time, Danette and Graham are doing a free webinar on how to become a great leader. And then on the 12th, they're having a free coaching session. So if you've got any problems, if you've listened to this podcast and there's things you want help with, you can organise a time and talk with them for free. Enjoy and have a magical week.